Okay, here we go. Go.
Can you hear me?
Ah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you before.
Hi, I don't know what is going on. Well, I know what's going on. Retrograde is what's going on.
Right, right.
Hmm. Okay, I know that it's been a little hectic, but we're going to get this in. I was trying to do my headset and my audio didn't want to work with that either. So I'm going to have to do it without my headset, which means it might be a little loud in the background, but we're going to do what we got to do. So there were a couple of people in the room the first time, and I want to see if maybe we can get them back. Wait for a minute for the people to get in here. I'm still trying to get my setup adjusted. There, okay. Hey, sis. How you feeling?
I'm good, thank you.
How was your birthday?
How are you? Oh, my birthday was wonderful. I did absolutely nothing. That was my plan.
Okay, as long as that's what you wanted to do.
And played some folks. A couple of folks came by. We did some several rounds of 500. I won some. I lost some. So just relax and chill. Had some house music on.
Yeah.
Did a lot of chocolate.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as you were satisfied, that's the whole point.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna save these lives as I do them, so we can jump in. I'm just getting the phone straight. So for anybody that is popping in, I am Charlene E. Green. I am an author. I am a publishing coach. I'm an editor. I'm a poet. I write novels. I write self-help. I write poetry. I write screenplays. I do a lot of writing, but I also help other people with their writing and help them with their publishing process. So what we are doing this month is a series where I am talking to some of the authors whose books that I've worked on and kind of checking in with them to see where they are in their journey, what's been going on since they published their books. And we're going to be talking about the process. We're going to be talking about what it was like working together. We're going to talk about some of the misconceptions in publishing, things that people probably don't know and they need to know before they get on this journey. So we're just going to have a nice informal talk. And Imani, I'm going to ask you to read from your book. So I hope you are prepared with, something in particular that you want to share with the audience. So just a little bit of a background on me. I moved to Los Angeles from Oakland in 2003, and I came here to pursue my writing career. So at the time, I had an unfinished novel. It was half in my head and half typed up. And I also had a completed screenplay called Love's Train. So when I moved here, the idea was I was gonna get this movie made. Put that in quotes. I was gonna make this movie, right? And then at some point, I was gonna finish my novel, my one novel. And so when I got here, I ended up shopping the screenplay and rewriting the whole thing. And like I almost had a couple of deals, but they fell through. But I learned a lot in that process. And but within that, I had finished my first novel. And then that kind of took over everything. It just kind of took over the screenplay. It went in its own direction. And so I ended up focusing pretty much all of my attention on my novel, which is One Man's Treasure. That's the first novel. And I thought it was only going to be one. And then throughout that publishing journey, people kept asking me when the second novel was coming out, when the sequel was coming out. And I was like, there is no sequel. I don't know what you're talking about. The story is over. You didn't see how it ended? Like, I wrapped it up nice and pretty. So I don't know what you guys are talking about. And that went on for a long time. And finally, I met a woman at a book signing that I had, and she told me that she wanted to see a sequel. And I was like, I don't know what y'all are talking about. I don't have anything else to say. And so we got on the phone and we talked for 2 hours. And in those 2 hours, she convinced me about why there needed to be a sequel. So now there are 2 novels. And so I ended up getting a book deal with Kensington Publishing in 2008. And so both of those novels came out. One came out in 2009, and then the other one came out, the sequel came out in 2010. So that is partially my publishing journey. But within that, I worked for publishers, 2 publishers and a literary agent. And that is where I was able to begin honing my skill with editing and learning the process, the in-depth process about what you need to be doing, what you need to have before you even think about publishing. So I did not come into this and start making shit up. Like,
Right.
I think people, a lot of times when I'm telling people about the process, they're like, oh, you have a really good process. I'm like, no, 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 no. It's not my process. It's the process. And so I really want people to understand that when I am telling them what to do, I'm not just because I feel like it. This is really the way it goes. It's like, cooking. There's a recipe to every dish. And if you don't make the recipe right, the dish ain't gonna come out right. And it's the same thing with publishing. There is a recipe to follow, so to speak. And you can skip steps if you want to, but your result is not going to be grand. And so that's part of why I wanted to do this series, because I want to talk to people who I know personally who have published because they've worked with me. And there have been ups and downs. There have been pretty much everyone that I've worked with has had some type of moment where they were like, I had no idea I was supposed to be doing XYZ. And that is why these conversations we're about to have this month are important, because I need people to know what to expect. So what better way to do that than to have authors that I have worked with personally to share their experience, and they have finished products. So nobody that I'm talking to this month is going to be just now working on a book. They are finished products. They have reviews. People are reading them. So today I have my friend and my sister in poetry and in all kinds of writing, Imani Williams. And her book is called Rootwork, Triumph Over Trauma. And I'm going to let Imani introduce herself a little deeper and talk about her project. And so, Imani, could you give the people kind of a backstory on you and your writing career and how you came to write Rootwork?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me, Charlene.
Thank you.
I'm CImaniWilliams, and I've been writing pretty much all of my life. I received my first writing award in 5th grade for a short story, and I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I was invited to read it, for like a school assembly, and then that evening again when the parents were invited in for a program. And lastly, I was invited to share my story at City Hall in front of the Detroit City Council. And that was a
Imani, your
huge.
audio is a little low. Can you turn up your volume a little bit? I can hear you, but it's kind of low.
How is that?
Oh,
Is
much
that
better.
better?
Much.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So I was invited down to the City Hall, and my mother came, and the school principal, and my auditorium teacher, Miss Milliken, who was actually the first person to ever put a microphone in my hand. So I had from an early age, had a interest in sharing information with the microphone. I like that. I kind of gravitated towards the stage. It gave me an opportunity for self-expression because I was one of those black girls who like had, you know, decent grades, had good grades, but my citizenship always left a little bit to be desired because I talked so much. So this was a way to keep me off punishment, to keep me from, I didn't like being scolded, and so this was a way for me to, writing became a way to express myself, and that was always one of my favorite classes throughout elementary school, was auditorium. I went on to major in communications and journalism as an undergraduate. I thought I would be doing something with a cable company. That never happened. I wanted to be like behind the scenes in production and also have something to do with writing, but it never came to fruition in that form. And so I went on to get a graduate degree in counseling, one to help better understand, you know, my family dynamics and myself. And then I got a second one in creative nonfiction writing. And I decided, I knew going into that program that I wanted to put the two together and do my own program to help people, help survivors of trauma, and using creative arts to do so. People always say, "Well, that's really interesting that you would put those two together." No, that was kind of intentional. Because I think growing up, I would have done some things differently, like maybe not, you know, concentrated so much on cheerleading, and instead asked to be in some creative writing classes. Even as a 9, 10, 11-year-old, I just don't. I think it's never too early to start that journey, and so many people need a positive mode of self-expression, and writing is one, and creative arts is one. Yeah.
So, is Rootwork your first book?
It is the first book with my name on the cover. I have written for many anthologies, maybe 9 or 10, and you know, I was excited each time to one to have my work included in those publications, alongside some names that I knew and a lot that I admired. But this is the first time that it is mine from front to end.
And what part of your journey did you decide, you know what, I need to have my own book. I need to have a whole book of mine and not just be in a publication. When did it hit you that it was time?
I'm sure it has something to do with being a part of Writers Black Art Connected Facebook group, because people are always publishing, and you know, so you get to see it. You get to see a lot. And I'm like Issa Rae. I celebrate everybody black, right? So, but while I'm celebrating, I'm saying, you know, what do we really need to do to get this going? Because we've been talking about it. But on the flip side, I'm really glad that I went through, the process that I had to go through each of those anthologies as well. Because everybody has their requirements and their writer's guidelines and how it has to be laid out. And I really want to be like mindful of like folks' time. So like the editors and the formatters, and as we'll get into the conversation, we'll talk more about how you explained what the expectations were for people that you work with. And I think it's really important. I think that a lot of people like glide over so much of what they need. Now stop there.
Yep. So Rootwork, Triumph Over Trauma. It is your life story in the form of poetry and prose. And I would like to know when you knew you were going to tell your story. There are all kinds of ways to tell stories and all kinds of stories to tell, but I always say people who are telling their story, their personal story, they're the most courageous writers. because you got to dig in there and, you know, unearth all that truth and all those secrets and all that pain. And I have not done it. I have thought about it, but yeah, it's not in me right now. But I admire all of you memoir writers. And so for you, I would like to, because I read the book, I worked on the book, so I know what's in there. There's some stuff in there. And how do you feel, you know, knowing that you have revealed all of this stuff, this truth about your life? And when did you know, like, okay, I'm gonna give it to him?
That's a great question because, like, one of the first writers' workshops I took at home in Detroit was at the Scarab Club, and I actually signed up for a fiction workshop, which is my least favorite to write.
Oh,
And
really?
I struggled, and it was like all marked up. And then
Yeah,
my
fiction is
dad
hard.
passed, right? And then my dad passed, and I could not write for 6 months. And so I stepped away from that fiction class, and it wasn't being offered. When I came back 6 months later, they were doing poetry, and I said, okay, I'll try this poetry. And so consequently, that fiction piece, like, it's so rough. It's probably cringeworthy for me to look at that. If I can even find the floppy disk or whatever it's on. I mean, it's old. You know,
You said floppy
um,
disk. That means,
right.
yeah,
Take you back.
right,
And in that poetry workshop, it was different from other poetry workshops that I would participate in that it was intergenerational, it was racially diverse, but I still managed, I needed to write through some of my pain from losing my dad. So that served a purpose. And that is where also I started touching on childhood sexual abuse in that workshop in the poetry. Um, and I knew I was going to do something, some kind of memoir, but it was going to be, a collage of things like it is poetry, short stories, and personal essays. Certainly, by the time I was accepted into Antioch for this writing program in December of 2008, I was sure of what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to go into creative nonfiction writing specifically, um, as opposed to fiction or poetry. And there's some people you were able to, like, pick a second genre and have that added into your program as well. I wasn't doing
right.
all that. This was enough because I was writing and still working and still grieving and still, like, healing a lot from the loss of my father. And then, halfway through, towards the end, my mother got, getting sick and
Right.
passing. So it was a lot going on. And I do recall my mentor, who was my final mentor for this program, Hope Edelman, saying, when I finished successfully, she just sent me the sweetest note. And she's like, I have never seen anybody this determined to complete everything you had going on, you know. And she was not easy by any means, like, because I don't think folks get paid enough to do what they have to do as editors, as um, someone that is integral to that book being done properly.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah.
Um, I appreciate that last part because people do not understand what a difficult job editing is, and they also don't understand that editing is a multi-leveled job. It's not just one way. There are many types of editing to be done on a book, and every single type of editing needs to be done on the book. And there are people that don't know that, and even if some of them do know it, they don't want to do all the processes because they cost money. And I always tell people, if you don't have your money together, you probably shouldn't publish right now, because you need to pay the people who are going to help you put your book together. Because unless you can do it yourself, unless you can do all the phases of the project, okay, I can, but that's because this is the field I work in. You know what I mean? I'm not just the writer. I also was trained, and I've also, so I've been trained on all the elements of editing, and I've done them all. So I know what they are, and so I can do them all, but that's me. I'm a rarity. It's not that many people that can do the writing and then do all the phases of the editing plus the formatting, even though I hate formatting, and I'm not afraid to say, like, formatting is not my thing, is not my ministry. I know how to do it, but I purposely, like, have not delved into the deeper end of formatting, because I already am like, kind of like, no, but I know how to do it. And so when it comes down to it, I know how to put a book together from start to finish. That's because I've been trained. People who have not been trained and who aren't even aware of all of the procedures that are involved in putting a book together, they just come to me and say, oh, I finished my book and now I need an editor. And over the years, what I have learned is that I'm gonna be honest. I have never, and I'm saying never, and that, you know, never is huge. I've never met a client who was actually ready for the editing process they thought they were ready for. Let me say that again. I have never had a client who came to me and was actually ready for the process that they thought they were ready for. They needed an editor, but not the level that they thought they were on. They needed the beginning of the stages. They were talking about late stage editing. And see, that's what people don't understand about this process. There's beginning stage editing and there's end stage editing. And when they come to me, they're always talking about end stage editing, which is copy editing. Copy editing is where you take care of all of the punctuation and spelling and all the technical stuff, the capitalization, and that's the last part of the cleanup. And then right after that is proofreading, but I do both. So if you hire me for editing, you're automatically going to get proofreading, because it's dumb to copy edit something and then have somebody else proofread it. That doesn't make any sense to me. So that's why it comes with my service. That's not, all editors don't do that. Some editors are the copy editor, and then you got to pay for a proofreader. That's just their thing. I don't function like that. But even still, before you get to copy editing, you still got to deal with the editing of your story. There's a whole story editing element that has to happen to make sure that the story is being, whatever story, doesn't matter what story it is, make sure the story is being told in a clear way. Make sure the message is coming across right for the reader, to make sure it makes sense. In the writer's mind, it always makes sense because, you know, they're the one telling the story, right? But writers have to think about the reader. And just like in real life, when you're telling a story, you can't just tell part of the story. You have to tell the whole story, even the stuff that the person who's listening, you kind of like forget they don't know that stuff. And so, you know, sometimes when you're talking to somebody and you're telling a story, and then they'll go, wait, what happened to so-and-so? And you're like, they went to the store. And you say, and they say, well, you didn't say that. And you're like, yeah, they went to the store. You know, they went down the street to 7-Eleven. And then you're like, oh, they went to 7-Eleven? That's the store they went to? See, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. When you're telling a story, you tell the version that's in your head when you have all the details, but then you only give some of the details to the person who's listening. And then when people say things like, wait, so what happened? No, I don't understand. Go back now. And then you're like, what? I told you so-and-so called so-and-so and they said blah, blah, blah. And then the person is like, no, you didn't say that part. Oh, well, that's what I meant. See right there? Mm-hmm. That's what I meant does not work in storytelling. Not in verbal storytelling, and definitely not on paper. But you know, that is a real thing. Those conversations, somebody's having that conversation right now. Well, that's what I meant. Well, you know what I mean. Well, you know I meant that. No, I don't know what you mean. I don't know the story. It's your story. You have all the details. You need to give them to me. I'm not there, unless I was there, right? But I'm not there. I wasn't there with you. So you got to give me all the tea. Right. And that's what people struggle with, because they think they've given all the tea when they've written their story. And then I come in and here I go, you know, highlighting and asking questions. And it's like, to them, they feel attacked almost, like I'm tearing their stuff apart. But my point is, if I have all these questions about the story that you just told, that means you did not tell the story properly. Period. It's no offense, no judgment. It's just that there is an art to storytelling, whether it's poetry, whether it's a memoir, whether it's fiction, whatever. There is an art to storytelling, and you cannot think that you've told the whole story in the first draft. So now we're talking about drafts. And when people come to me and they ask for me to edit their book, guess how many drafts they usually have only done? One. There is no ready for editing, the kind of editing they are asking me for, off one draft. Especially if you are not a seasoned storyteller. I'm a seasoned storyteller, and I still have to go back and do content editing. That's what we're talking about right now. We're talking about content editing or developmental editing. There's different terminologies for it, but this is where we are crafting the story. And people do not know how to craft their story fully and properly. And it's no shame in it. It's just that some people are natural storytellers. Some people go to school for it. But if you are neither, like if you haven't been to school for it and you're not a natural storyteller and you call yourself writing a book, now you really have extra work to do. You can't just throw a story together and then give it to people and think that just because you type the end, it's the end. It's a whole other world that you have to get into if you want to give the readers an enjoyable experience. And as writers, our job, if we're going to share our words with the world, our job is to make sure that what we're sharing is clear and meaningful and enjoyable. And a lot of times writers are not thinking about that because they just want to be a published author. It just sounds so glorious, and it sounds like the thing to do. It's nice, but it's work. And so, you know, part of what I want to talk to the authors about is that process, crafting the story. Now yours is poetry and prose, and it's put together in segments, but even still, each poem, each piece of prose has to be crafted fully. You're telling an entire story in a poem, even if the poem is 10 lines. You're telling an entire story in a piece of prose, you know, where it's just a narrative, even if it's one page. It still has to flow a certain way. And so in your experience as a poet and someone who writes poetry and prose, not so much fiction, but in the genres that you do write in, what has been your experience with drafts and crafting and editing? Because it has to be done whether we like it or not. I don't care how seasoned of a writer you are, you have to content edit. You have to edit. You got to do it. You got to give it to somebody to do it, but it's got to be done. What's been your experience with editing your own work? Meaning, like, okay, I wrote the poem, or I wrote the, you know, the article. Now I got to make sure it's right, clear, and enjoyable, and it's going to make sense to the reader.
We really spent a lot of time on process in grad school, which for me was totally different than undergrad as a communications and journalism minor, major and minor. This creative writing thing was totally different. And we spent so much time. It was, you know, it was heavy reading and it was heavy writing.
Mm-hmm.
And we spent so much time breaking down, you know, some really wonderful literary works. Some of them I enjoyed. Some of them were hard as hell to, you know, to get to the meat of, but we had to. So, you know, I pushed through. But I would say those 2 years in that program, because oftentimes people say, well, what in the world do you do with the MFA in creative writing? You know, if you're not going to teach. I'd already taught 9 years at the university level, so that was not what I was trying to do. I knew with this program that I wanted to tell my stories and help other people tell their stories, but not necessarily sitting in that traditional classroom to do it. Like, I like small groups, I like one-on-one, that type of thing. And so I would say it was mostly developed there. And then trying to see, you know, I had newspaper writing experience for community newspapers. I had plenty of that going into that program, so I understood about my editing process within those spaces. Like, again, you know, adhering to those writers' guidelines, understanding what some editors were easier to work with in that community space, if you will, than others. But I learned a lot at all of the papers that I wrote for, which then helped me move into magazine writing and being hired as a freelancer to write magazine articles and sometimes to be a regular contributor. Again, understanding what the editing process was for each of those entities, and understanding that even with magazine writing, that generally the editor is gonna come back with questions, and so you're gonna have a second draft and maybe a third. And I did not, you know, go through as much flack with the newspapers, maybe because we were weekly and we were just always, you know, either having a meeting in person or a meeting over the phone to get questions answered further. But I think that those community papers were a great place for me to get a start on different writing styles, and still keeping my voice. It has always been very important to me. That's why I love op-ed so much, is because I get to share my voice.
Right. Yeah. Can you share an experience where you submitted a piece of writing and it came back and you felt like like the editor had like torn it apart, or if you've not had that experience, if you felt like, hey, I thought I told You're like, I thought I made the thing clear. And then it comes back with like all these questions. And how had that made you feel?
It has absolutely happened. Publication was, yes, somebody that I was very interested in writing for, because, you know, they write on feminist issues, they write on mental health, um, and they supposedly have a extremely inclusive attitude. Um, so, you know, it did not go well. I was commissioned. It was a $500 piece.
Mm.
Um, and I was writing on and using Dr. Joy DeGruy to talk about trauma, um, and the fact that it is encoded in our DNA, which is Dr. Joy's her premise from her book, and she's, you know, national scholar. And so I reached out to her and I told her, I said, I said, it is so racist. What is happening is so racist. Now, if the article is just funky, then it's funky. I said, so can you please take a look at this and tell me where I need to like focus to get this point across? Because, you know, a $500 article, you know, I'm thinking where I know where that money needs to go, right? So I'm counting on it.
Right.
And you know, Dr. Joyce said, you know, she said this happens frequently with this topic. Um, it's and it's why she said I pressed the conversation. So in the end, I did not get paid. They cut it. They did not pay a kill fee, and I felt some kind of way about that for years. And I think that was 2017 or 18.
Wow.
For
So
publication that I respected.
you spent the time writing the article, even though like it didn't go as planned, and they just didn't pay you anything?
They didn't pay me. They didn't run it. They killed it and didn't kill the story, and then didn't pay a kill fee. And I was like, this is like the organization that I really respected. And but I understood that it wasn't just my mind. Once I had talked back to Dr. Joy, and she told me how, you know, the topic is just so hard for um, other people to swallow that are not black, that don't understand how this coding works with trauma.
Right.
Because then we'd have to talk about reparations some more, et cetera, and then we'd have to talk about putting some of the onus on mental health and how that is handled with black people, and why we're scared to call the police sometimes when there is an incident, and we know that our loved one needs some help, and you got to make a choice between calling the police or letting them, you know, be in this manic state. And what do? Because you don't want to hand anybody a death sentence. You want them to get help. So it's a bigger societal thing, and I still think it's an important conversation. So, you know, I may revisit that at some point. I was butthurt for a long ass time, though. I really was.
I don't blame you. I mean, the thing is, any time that you put into a creative endeavor, you would like to have it acknowledged, you know, and to have them not only not run the article, but also not pay you anything, not even $10.
Can I get $20? Can I get nothing? Like, not even a gift card. Nothing. I can't say thank you.
Wow. And see, you know, as artists, just across the board, there is such a level of people just take artists for granted. Mm-hmm. Even other artists, you know what I mean? There is this you didn't do it right, so you're not good enough at all. And it's like, yeah, but the effort that I put into this, even though it didn't go where we wanted it to go, like, it's almost like, well, if you didn't get it right, then it was no point. And that's not true. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's as I feel like it happens with comedians. It happens, I mean, comedians especially, like, they're up there like in front of everybody right now, live and in person. They got to get it right. And the
Right.
thing is, for comedians, I have like the utmost respect for them, because all of their results are in the now. Like, their job is to make you laugh. And if they don't,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's a bad day. And for us, you know, we do the writing, we do all the thing, and then we give it to the people after, and we hope that they receive it well. But for someone who is like, right now, this is what I got to give you right now, and then you have to respond right now, that's a whole other level. But even
Right.
comedians, like, people be talking about him like, oh, he ain't funny. Damn, da, da, da. Are you gonna tell the
Mm-hmm.
jokes? Can you do it? Because I mean, I know I've
Right.
done it. Meaning,
A lot of
like,
pressure. Yeah.
I've you know, made my comments about comedians and then been like, well, hold on a minute now. You're not gonna get on stage and start telling no jokes. So maybe zip it. You know what I mean? And so I'm guilty of it, but I also see it as a problem where people who are not artists, they take us for granted, and even other artists can take us for granted, based on this type of mentality that as an artist, you're supposed to get it right every single time on, you know, the first try. And that's not always how that goes. And so um, just the fact that you had that experience and you weren't even able to get compensated for your effort, for the time, what I call
It taught me a lot of lessons, like a lot of lessons. And
the,
again, I just think that the biggest thing is that, like, I just lost respect for the publication. I know how important this topic is, and it's, but like I said, I took solace in the fact that Dr. Cruz said was, she was like, I've been fighting this battle at that time for, like, she said, 11, 12 years. She said,
mm-hmm.
I know.
So then you decided to talk about trauma in your own way, which
Hmm.
I always feel like is the best way to do a writing project anyway, um, because then you have control of the narrative.
Hmm.
You're not relying on like a whole other entity to approve you and what you're saying. You still need like the editing factor, you know, even if you're telling it your way, but it's a different energy, because this is, it's not, I don't feel like people can tell you how to talk about your trauma. We can clean it up, you know what I mean? But to have an entire organization be like, nah, that ain't it.
Right.
That's a lot. So now you have your book in your own words, and it's a whole book and it's all yours. Let's talk about how you feel having this book finished, and how the process went for you.
Well, I am absolutely elated to have the process finished, because not only was I, getting things ready for print, I was also working on the audiobook version, which is now finished
Right.
and published for
Which is
sale.
fantastic
Um,
way.
yes, so I want to shout out 105 Publishing Company, Black-owned publishing company, for that opportunity. I would never do both at the same time again. That was absolutely insane. Um, and so Imani to with the Gemini to be doing the dual thing. But yeah, that was a lot to do together, and I would not recommend that people do that. You need to get your manuscript down for your your ebook and your print version, and then if you're going to do the audio, do that later after everything else, like after the other one is published.
Right.
Don't try to combine the two, but clearly it can be done, but don't do that to yourself.
Right.
I knew that at the front end of the book that I wanted to start with those 3 signature poems, and that I wanted to end with a note of hope, because I knew it was a heavy read. I knew that it was going to need a trigger warning. I really do try to respect readers. I think people deserve a heads up if they are reading something or looking into reading something that might trigger them. And, I think for some people, because it is, the way it's sectioned with poetry and prose and throughout all the sections, what I did struggle with was whether to put all the poetry at the front or whether to put it at the back. And I was like, no, it needs to be interspersed, because these short stories and personal essays tie into some of the poems. So, but mainly I knew what I wanted to start and what I wanted to end with. And at the middle was going to be a whole lot of things combined.
Now your search for, well, we know how you came to have me on your team, because we go back. But when you did come to me, if you recall, you had already done the formatting. Like it had already been formatted, even slightly. And remember I said, the editing comes before the formatting. And so remember, your formatter had already done the work when you came to me. So this is part of the process that people get backwards. Like you just weren't aware of the recipe, right? And so when you came to me, and I was like, so I can do the editing, but your formatting is already done, and that is going to make it challenging for me to do it the way it needs to be done completely. And so that was, one of the hiccups of our situation was, remember I was saying, I'm going to clean it up the best I can with the formatting done. Because see, for people that don't understand this recipe, is the formatting is after all the cleanup is done. All the editing has to be done, all the proofreading, all the words have to be exactly where they're going to be. No more moving around. You're finished touching all the words. And then you format. But a lot of people write their draft, and then they get their stuff formatted, and then they come to me and they're talking about they want an editor, and I'm like, is this formatted? And then it's like, and then they're confused. Then I have to like break the whole situation down for them, that like, okay, it goes this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? It doesn't go 1, 3, 2, 5, 4. And that's how people come to me, 1, 3, 2, 5, 4. And they're not ready to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because then they have to take things apart. And that's why learning the process, learning the recipe from start to finish is important. Because man, when you put all your heart and soul into each process and then you put it together backwards, you see what happened when we were working on your book. And I was like, okay, some of the stuff that needs to be tweaked, I'm not going to be able to tweak it because the formatting is already done. And I cannot move the words out of a certain area without messing up the rest of the stuff. And now you could have had your book reformatted. But see, what would that have cost you?
Right.
See, and that's the thing. So we, you know, I mean, if you got that kind of money, then great. But, you know, formatters are expensive. Every phase of publishing costs money.
Right.
And, you know, we already knew what your situation was. It was done. And then, you know, the people that you hire, they have schedules. So even if you had wanted to have it formatted again, guess what? You got to get back on that person's schedule where you got to get in where you fit in. Who knows where you're going to be, right? So there's all these things that people don't think about when they just want to get their book done. And I'm like, hey, like, there are other people involved in this process that you're not considering. They have other clients. They have lives to live. They're not at your beck and call. You know what I mean? And so these are the rude awakenings that I have to give people, you know, when they come to me with 1, 3, 4, 2, 5, right? And then I got to show them how to put it back together. And they're like, oh, I'm not really trying to do all that. I'm sorry, but if you're going to give this product to the world, I'm going to need you to do it right, or don't do it at all. And see, they don't like to hear me say that, but I have said it. I have said it many times. Maybe now is not the right time for you to be publishing if you don't want to do the process right, if you don't have the money for it, if you don't, you know, have all your ducks in a row. Maybe now is not a good time. They don't like that. I don't care. I'm going to tell you. It's not a good time, or get your stuff together, come back to me, or whatever. But, or we're going to work with it, you know, how we can. Like with your situation, how, you know, I was able to do a whole lot. But like I said, you know, I was like, just so you know, there's going to be a few places where it's going to be something that's not getting fixed because I couldn't move it out of the area, or if I did move it, the whole section jumped. And see, once you start moving stuff around in a formatted document and stuff start jumping, child, then you got to figure out how to do it. Right. And that was one of the things that I encountered where I would like fix something and then a whole section would jump and I'd be like, oh, no, 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 no. So I have to put it back where I got everything from. And that was hard too. So it's like, you know, it was a learning experience, not for me because I knew what was happening, but for you, I appreciated how you handled the learning experience, because some people are very, some people are rude. Some people they get mad.
You have to be teachable. Yeah, I believe you have to be teachable in any situation.
Yeah, you know? And they're not teachable. A lot of people are not teachable. They feel like I'm making them do unnecessary work or things that I just feel like they should do. And I try to explain to them, no, I don't want either of us doing no extra work. But because you did not study this process before you jumped in it, and because you decided to go about it your own way, now you have a puzzle that's not put together properly. And now you're mad at me because I'm telling you where it's not put together properly and what you're going to have to do to get it put together properly, which usually involves this. Right. And they don't like that. But I had to do it. I had to pay. You know what I mean? My books didn't, you know, before I started putting my own books together, I had to pay. I had to pay to have stuff published. Before I had a book deal with New York, I had to pay. People don't understand that. Like, yes, I do my own books now, but I didn't always know how to do my own books. Somebody else had to do that shit for me. You know what I mean? And then when you get a book deal, of course, then you don't have to worry about it. But Before the book deal, I published independently. And when you publish independently, damn it, you got to pay if you want some stuff done right. If you
Right.
want quality. If you want quality, you're going to have to pay. So it's not like I got out scot-free. I had to do the same thing that I'm telling everybody else they have to do. And yes, when I looked at the numbers, I was like, ooh, that's how much that cost. Ooh, I got to pay for that too? Oh, I'm telling you, I had my lessons early and I didn't like any of them. I didn't like any of them. All them mugs hurt. They did. But this is the process. And so that's how I grew to know, oh, okay, so let me equip the people with the information. But some people don't want it. But so what I appreciated about working with you is that you know, it wasn't like it was fun hearing, you know, that we had to restructure some things, but you took it. You know what I mean? And you weren't trying to fight me on like what I was telling you that needed to be done. And so have your beautiful product. Can you hold the book up for the people so they can see the beautiful cover? Let's talk about the cover. Who designed that cover? Wasn't me.
Her name is, well, she goes by on Instagram as is at Art by Cheetah, Chida. And I found her, someone in another Black writers group I belong to, she just finished their cover, and they were sharing, and I was like, oh my God, I love the work. And she shared Cheetah's name with me. And so we've only ever dealt with each other over Messenger on Instagram. But I will tell you, and she's not even in the States. She's somewhere, somebody's European country.
Okay. She a beautiful cover for you, though.
Beautiful. She very affordable. Easy to work with, very responsive, you know, in the chat, in the DMs with the messages. And she did 2 pictures for me. She said, I'll do 2 for that price. I would say that it wasn't even $50, you know. And she wouldn't take any extra money. She just says, I just love to see people get what they want for their book. She practiced, you know, kind of ministry, and she was just so easy to work with. And so I have taken the book cover and put it on my earrings, so that the ear art. This is mine personally, because my picture is on it. But the other one is just the cover of the book.
And I have beautiful.
Yeah, you have a pair, right? So I was able to, you know, for mine, move the bird over a little bit. She, you know, and so I just love this. It's just so bright and vibrant. And I love the ones you got too. But,
yeah.
You know, so I think it's good to, you know, think about even early, you know, be thinking a little bit about merchandising, but not, you know, so much that you don't remember to, you know, handle the mechanics of the book.
Right.
So, but yes, Art by Cheetah, she was awesome to work with.
Do you have her, what's her Instagram? Can you post that for anybody that might be at the book cover process and maybe is looking for someone?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to have you
and she's on Instagram.
Perfect. So I would like for you to read from your book. Can you give us a little preview of what you're about to read, like maybe like a very short backstory about what you're about to read and what that passage that you're about to read means to you?
Yes, I'm going to read from Shrinking Violet, which is a poem. And wow, the backstory on this is that it deals with a very hard breakup, and kind of it was a catalyst for parts of this poem were the catalyst for me going into a long stretch of intentional celibacy and really understanding that I don't have to bid myself into a pretzel to have be in a relationship. Like, I'm going to be me, and if that's too much for you, that's okay. And if it ain't enough for you, that's still okay. Because I'm gonna be okay for me, and I'm gonna be enough for
Right.
me. And it took me so long to get to that point, you know. So I think I will do an excerpt from it because it's a little long.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Whenever
it's a
your
little.
floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Shrinking Violet. I started to disappear, losing a bit more of myself every time you took a dig. I played it off. Shrinking Violet. When I often cried, as many sensitive souls do, you told me I was trying to manipulate you with my tears instead of asking me what was wrong. Shrinking Violet. When you commented on my self-worth to be better and do better, you said you liked who I was becoming and not who I already was. Shrinking Violet. When I finally grew tired of being ignored and belittled in what was not my version of happiness, I spoke up and you shut me out completely. Shrinking Violet. When you left physically after years of being gone emotionally, I shut down completely. Shrinking Violet. Although it took years to get you out of my system, I did it. I sat still, became quiet, and got down to the business of getting to know myself. Shrinking violets can change under universal law and come back in full bloom with knowledge and appreciation of self. Shrinking violet, I don't think so.
Mm, I love that. I mean, I remember it. I remember it from the book. I really love your vulnerability in all of the phases of the book, and how confidently you were vulnerable. If that makes sense. It's like you could tell that you were ready to be telling these stories, you know? And I think that that's why currently when people are reading the book, it's getting such positive reviews because telling a story is also an energy, and you can tell when somebody is really giving it, and that translates to readers, and that's what I feel like people are getting from your book. All of the positive reviews is because you were really giving it. You were ready to be revealing all of this deep stuff, so you weren't holding back. One of the things I can say about your project was that, and I think I remember telling you this, I did very little content editing in your book. I don't even, might have been just a few pieces here and there that needed a little tweak, but I can't even really say content was flawed like that. You know what I mean? And that says a lot about how you took the time to do your process right. You know what I mean? To tell your stories completely and as deeply as you needed to, because there wasn't a lot of story editing needed. It was, more on the technical side, punctuation and this and that and the other. And so that is something to be celebrated when, when you give your project to the editor and you get out of there without, 75 questions about what you said in your content. That's a good storyteller. You're a good storyteller. You know what I mean? and
Okay,
a
thank you.
solid storyteller. And that is important. You can't skip that part of the publishing process. Being a good storyteller is important, is paramount to the publishing
Yeah.
process if you're trying to give your readers an enjoyable experience.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people are not necessarily thinking about that, which is why they throw stuff together and just publish it. And then, when you go on Amazon, you see the reviews and they're ripping the author to shreds, because you can tell when people do not take the time to tell their story properly. And with your book, that was one of the things I appreciated about working on your book, is that when I read your poems and I read your prose, I did not feel like you left something out. I didn't, even if you did leave something out, I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't finish poems and was like, seemed like, was she finished with that? You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? And that's to be celebrated. So I just want to give you your flowers.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It was all a process. But I was absolutely ready to tell every story that was in there. It's been inside for a long time. Some I struggled with for years. You know,
Yep.
Twinglet and Legacy of a Love Betrayed was certainly, I had to go back to those because those are the two I questioned the most about. Those are the two I felt I would be judged the most about. But at the end of the day, I had to say, like, well, fuck it. If you don't like it, don't read it. This is my truth, and I just gotta stand on it,
Right. It happened. It is what happened. You know.
Right,
Um,
right. What
you
we not gonna do is, debate my truth. It's mine.
that part. That part. And you did a great job of delivering your truth. Do you have one more excerpt to give us before we close out?
Let's see real quick. Butterfly free. I refuse to feel bad for something I wanted. Too often, women freaking second guess themselves into unbearable corners. I should have come of age in the early 70s so that I could have experienced free love. Without the emotional responsibility, at a crossroad with black politics, I've gagged on black respectability, pushing down vile and vileness that puts women into trick bags. When claiming and owning our sexuality, I'm not buying it anymore. Gonna do me and be free. Butterfly free.
Yes. Well, you definitely did you in that book. And and so for people who don't know where to find your book, can you give them all the tea on that?
Yes. CImaniWilliams.com. And that's also how you can find me across social media. Imani Williams across social media. CImaniWilliams.com for the book. Grab it for yourself or for someone that that enjoys just the art of poetry and storytelling, and who perhaps is also on the healing journey. I want people to
And
know
your
that
book
they can use it as a
is
form
on
of
Amazon.
expression. I'm sorry.
It's on Amazon too, right?
Yes, it's also on Amazon.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So once again, we have been talking with Imani Williams, or CImaniWilliams, across social media and on her website, CImaniWilliams.com, author of Rootwork, Triumph Over Trauma. It is poetry and prose. It is Imani's personal story of overcoming different levels of trauma, and she did a great job of putting that together, telling her story in poetry and prose. So if you are struggling with any type of trauma, this is a book that you can get into. It's not a long read, but it's a juicy read.
Right on. I want to add, if you have Audible credits, or you want to, join Audible, you can get the audio book. It's a different experience, and I've been told that people really they like my voice or something. But anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, Audible, same title, but just on Audible. All right, thank you for that.
No, that's important because I heard the audio and I was like, girl, this is this, and so to have both versions, it's a good way to get even another level of intimacy on the story when you hear it, when to hear your voice telling your truth as opposed to just reading it on paper, which is still profound. I think that yes, both versions are worth having, and getting into it at the same time. Read a chapter, listen to a chapter.
That'll be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a workbook is forthcoming.
Tell us a little bit, little something,
Well,
something.
I think that I ask a lot of readers. I ask them to push some feelings aside. I ask them to deal with some things, and I just think that they bear discussing. And I also think that that will help people who are on the healing journey kind of know better what they need to ask themselves for themselves, because everybody's journey is different.
Right.
I just feel so strongly in this in creative arts being used as part of the healing toolkit, that I want people to know, what you need to kind of ask yourself. What do you want your journey to look like? I mean, I know you want to get to the end of that bitch, but you're gonna have to do some self work. It's gonna be uncomfortable, and so it's something for people who are on that journey to think about as well. So.
Okay.
And it's still, and that's pulling up a lot of things too, because I'm going back in and seeing what needs to go into helping people to pull out what they need to for their lives. So
We thank
it's a
you.
process.
We thank you for the work that you're doing, because again, to tell a life story, especially one rooted in trauma, is a whole other level of storytelling that requires a lot of courage and compassion, because you're trying to help people. You're not just telling it just because you want people to latch on and like start doing their healing. So we appreciate you. And we look forward to the workbook. So is it going to be Rootwork, the workbook, or are you going to call it something else?
I don't know. Probably
Okay.
will be very similar, if not the same, just to keep it, on people's minds together.
Right. Well, we look forward to updates on that. And thank you for being my first
Thank you for having me. Thank you for
one.
just being the awesome queen, beautiful queen that you are, and putting literary information into terms that people can work with. Thank you. We need that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So this has been the first episode, so to speak, of the journey to literary legacy. And so throughout the month, I'm going to be having my authors sprinkled through here, and we're going to do these talks, and we're going to talk about the process, and each author will read from their book. So tomorrow morning, I have M. Johnson, who is the author of Peach and Plum. And she's going to be on at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So I know it's early, but I'm saving all the lives. So if you can't make it, you can get it after.
I'm going to
so
try and make it. Yeah.
No, it's fine if you can't. I just want to have the interviews done. So whether people can make it or not, I'm going to save them all because the content is what I'm hoping that people will grasp, even after the fact. So thank you, Imani, for taking time out of your evening. And I'll see you on the other side.
All right. Very
All right.
well.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Good night.